Welcome to this Angular Pivot Table tutorial. In this video, I will show you how to add and customize a toolbar in the Syncfusion Angular Pivot Table component. Using the Angular Pivot Table toolbar, you can easily access frequently used features like switching between pivot tables and charts, changing chart types, conditional formatting, exporting, and so on. First, I will open an existing Angular application where I have placed an Angular pivot table bound to a local JSON data source. If you need to learn how to get started with the Angular pivot table component, refer to the video linked in the YouTube card above. I will run this application using the ng-serve command. Look here, the pivot table is rendered with the defined data source. Now I will show you how to add a toolbar to the pivot table. To enable the toolbar option, I need to import the toolbar service module from the Angular Pivot View package and import it inside the Providers section. Then I set the Show Toolbar property to True in the Pivot View tag. Next, to add items to this toolbar, I use the built-in toolbar options like Create a Report, Save a Report, Chart Types, Exporting, Formatting, and so on. First, I'll show you how to enable the options for creating a new report and saving a report in the toolbar. To do that, I define the public property toolbar options with the array type toolbar items, which is automatically imported from the Angular Pivot View package. Inside the ng-on-init method, I initialize this toolbar options property and add the toolbar items new, save, and save as. Then, I assign this property to the toolbar options property of the pivot view tag. You can see the pivot table rendered with a toolbar. Even though these items are added in the toolbar, I need to handle their actions manually by using the built-in events. To do that, I add the Save Report event with the event handler Save Report and the New Report event with the event handler New Report in the Pivot View tag. These events will be triggered whenever a new report is created and the existing report saved. So, in these event handlers, I will define logic for creating a new report and saving an existing report. Let's see how to do it. First, I define the event handler Save Report, which accepts any type of argument. Inside this event handler, I initialize an empty array reports, and a Boolean flag is saved. Then, the event handler checks if there are existing reports in local storage under the key Pivot View Reports. If there are, it retrieves and parses them into the reports array. Next, it verifies that the arguments contain report and report name are not empty. Then it iterates through each item in the reports array. If a report with the same name as arg's report name is found, it updates that report with arg's report and sets is saved to true. If a report with the same name as arg's report name is not found, it adds the new report to the reports array. Finally, it updates the local storage with the updated reports array converted to a JSON string. Next, I will define a code for creating a new report. I obtain a reference to the pivot view component using the viewChild directive and create an instance for the pivot table named PivotGrid object. I add a reference to a pivot view tag. Then I define the new report event handler, where I set the data source settings property for the pivot table instance. Now I add the events for loading and fetching data with the appropriate event handlers. Then I define the event handlers with the appropriate logic for loading and fetching reports. This fetch report function retrieves a list of report names from the local storage and assigns them to arg's report name. The load report function is used to load a specific report from local storage based on the provided arg's report name. It then applies the data source settings from the loaded report to pivot grid object. To access the newly created reports and the existing reports, I add a drop-down list to the toolbar by adding the Load Toolbar item. This load drop-down will contain the collection of reports. Looking at the application now, you can see a drop-down added to the toolbar. Here, Sample Report is the default name of the current report, which is saved and named internally. I click Create a Report, and in the dialog that appears, I name the report New Report, and click OK. Checking now, a new report is created and added to the Reports drop-down list. Now I will show you how to use the Save As option. As you know, the current report is already saved in the sample report file. Suppose I change that report by sorting the country field in descending order and want to save it as a separate report. This is when I would use the Save As option. When I click Save As, a dialog opens and I name the report Updated Report. You can see that the updated report is saved as a separate file and added to the drop-down. Next, I am going to add options for renaming and removing reports from the pivot table. To display the remove and rename icons, I add the toolbar items Remove and Rename in the toolbar options. I need to bind these options with their respective events to handle their actions, so I bind the events Rename Report and Remove Report with their event handlers. I also need to define the appropriate logic in the event handlers. In the remove method, I retrieve reports from local storage and parse them into a report collection. Then I iterate through report collection to find the report with a matching name. If it is found, I remove it from the collection. After that, I check if Pivot Fewer Reports exists and is not empty. And then I update it with the modified report collection by converting it back to a JSON string. The Rename Report event handler initializes an empty array report collection and retrieves existing reports from local storage if available. It renames a report in report collection based on provided arguments and then updates local storage with the modified array. I click the Rename option and rename the report. The renamed report is updated in the drop-down. To delete any report, I use the Delete option. So far, I have shown you how to perform basic actions using toolbar items like create a new report and save, rename, and delete reports. Now let's see how to add the pivot chart option to the toolbar. To do that, I define the public property display option with the type display option, which is automatically imported from the pivot view package. Inside the ngOnInit method, I initialize this display option property. Set the view as both because I want to access both the chart and table. Initially, I would like to display the table, so let me set the primary property value to table. Then I assign this property to the display option property of the pivot view tag. Next, in the toolbar items list, I add the chart and grid options. You can see the grid and chart options added to the toolbar. When I click on the chart drop-down, 6 types of charts are initially shown. To access more types, I need to click the More option. In this dialog, you can see all the supported chart types. I choose the spline type. See the current report displayed as a spline chart. In addition to this, I can also customize the axis and legend options in the chart. By default, the chart is displayed on a single axis with legends. I'll turn on multiple axes and turn off the legends by clicking the appropriate options. The chart is updated with the defined options. I can switch to the table by clicking the grid option. Here, by default, the chart icon displays all chart types in a toolbar. If you want to limit the number of chart types, you can use the chart types property. I define the chart type options property and initialize it within the ngOnInit method. Then I assign only 4 types of charts: column, bar, area, and line to it. and I assign this chart type options value to the chart types property of the pivot view tag. Look at the toolbar now, only 4 types are displayed in the charts drop-down. Next, I will show you how to access the export feature from the toolbar. To do that, I enable the Allow PDF Export and Allow Excel Export properties in the Pivot View tag. Then I add the Export option to the toolbar option list. Look here, the Export option is added in the toolbar. I click on this option to export the report to PDF. The report is exported as a PDF. Alright, next you will see how to customize subtotals and grand totals from the toolbar. I add subtotal and grand total options to the toolbar list. You can see the subtotal and grand total options added to the toolbar. Notice the subtotals are displayed by default. Since I do not want to display the subtotals on a table, I select the appropriate option. Notice the subtotals are removed. The grand totals of both rows and columns are displayed on the pivot table. Now I want to display the grand total for rows only. I click the grand total option and display only the grand totals of rows by choosing the appropriate option. I also customize the position of the grand total so that it is at the top. Notice the grand total is customized as defined. Next, I will show you how to access formatting options in the toolbar. First, I import the number formatting service and conditional formatting service modules from the Pivot View package and inject them inside the Providers section. Then I enable the Allow Number Formatting and Allow Conditional Formatting properties in the Pivot View tag. I also add the formatting option to the toolbar list. Look here, the number formatting and conditional formatting can be accessed from the toolbar now. Let me demonstrate conditional formatting. I access it in the toolbar, and in this dialog, I add the preferred condition. I want to format all value fields that are less than 700 with a custom font style and a red background. I click the Apply button and the pivot table is updated with the defined format. To add the FieldList option in the toolbar, I import the FieldList service module from the Pivot View package and inject it into the Providers section. Then I enable the Show FieldList property in the Pivot View tag. I also add the FieldList option to the toolbar list. The FieldList icon appears on the toolbar. I can use it to filter, sort, add, and remove fields. Finally, I will show you how to add a custom toolbar option using the toolbar render event. So first, I add the toolbar render event with the event handler before toolbar render. Then I define this event handler, which accepts any type of argument. Inside this, I add the custom toolbar item with the desired position using the splice option. I add the prefix icon value as eToolExpand, PV icons, and tooltip text as Expand Collapse. To add an icon in the app CSS file, I add the required content for the eToolExpand class. Next, I define a toolbar clicked event. This event toggles the Expand All property of the data source settings of the pivot table, and I bind this event to the click method inside the before toolbar render event. I also add the Expand Collapse option to the toolbar list. Now, the Expand and Collapse icon appears on the toolbar. When I click the icon, the pivot table row and column values expand and collapse. In this video, I have shown you how to add and customize a toolbar in the Syncfusion Angular Pivot Table. If you want to try out the example used in this video, you can download it from the GitHub link in this video's description. I have also shared a link where you can learn about obtaining a free license key to use our Angular suite through our community license. If you are eligible, Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please like it and subscribe to our channel.